Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Also, subscribe to Off the Floor. That's our Discord server, $2.99 per month. We know a lot of you are moving to a new social media app. We are doing some of that too, but really the best place to talk Heat is still here. Link right here in the description. 10 different channels. You even get Sioux Falls updates if you want that from our guys Major and Matt. Check it out. It's Off the Floor. Again, link right here in the description. Also, check out the great sponsors of the Five Reasons Sports Network. This episode is especially sponsored by Underdog. Check out Underdog and join over 5 million happy players and $2 billion won. Underdog makes it fun and easy to cash in on all your favorite athletes' performances. Again, Tyler Herro has been hot. See if he's over 24.5 points in the next game. Maybe Terry Rozier will finally get going, so check his total as well. You can play Underdog using the code 5. That's the code 5. We mention that code all the time. Get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Again, there's a lot more to discover on the app itself, so check it out. I certainly have. And there's one disclaimer here I've got to mention. You must be at least 18 years old or 19 or more in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 in Colorado for some games, 21 in Massachusetts or Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. If you're concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. And yes, I'm going to put a hat on. I survived the beginning of this episode. If you're watching on YouTube, my daughter decided to style my hair and make me look like Betty Boop. Anyway, now today's episode.
Down the Biscayne. Yeah. 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frauds. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the flow playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust.
You sound scared.
It's about have the guts, we're here to bring the heat. Y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the Five Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to Five on the Floor. A lot going on in that open. Before we get to the floor plan, I want to mention one other thing. Our guy Mercy, who is responsible for our theme song here, may need an update eventually. He's got a vinyl release party on Friday, which is when most of you will be hearing this episode, for his latest project, Michelangelo. Come out and support hometown creatives like us. But again, we always support Mercy. He's been great to us. Exclusive merch from Mercy will also be available. Check out Music by Mercy on Instagram for more details. It's 10 o'clock at Lucky Records inside of 1800 Lucky in Wynwood, and I might make an appearance as well. Hopefully by then I will get this goop out of my hair, whatever it is that my daughter did to me today. All right, here's today's floor plan. We got Greg Sylvander. You can follow him at Greg Sylvander. We got Naveen Ganglani. You can follow him out in the Philippines. He joins us here from time to time. He's on the postgame show as well, and being part of our crew here. And we're going to get to something a little more serious here on the Heat front today, as they're preparing for two games in 3-day set in Indiana, trying to close a road trip at 3-3. That would be the ideal here. It's the best that they can do after what happened in Detroit. Of course, the ill-fated timeout call ruined a 40-point performance by Tyler Herro, and we're going to get into Herro here today. And we're going to get into it in the larger context. So we touched on this a little bit on the postgame the other night, but we haven't really dove into it, which is this. If Tyler Herro is going to be their best offensive player, which is what it looks like right now. Okay, now we're waiting on Jimmy Butler to get back from another sprained ankle. We'll see exactly when that is. If that is the case, what does that mean for this team going forward? Because I don't know necessarily that anybody anticipated this jump from Tyler, including the Heat. Like, I don't think anybody thought he would look this good through the first 10 games, that he would basically accept this role the way he has. But it's not just acceptance. It's he's taken on all of it and improved his game in the context of it, which is, so we talked about him being off the ball, shooting more threes and all that stuff. Well, we keep talking about the difficulties of adjustments that Bam is making. Okay, he's passing up open threes and it's gumming up the offense right now. You've got Terry Rozier, who has not been good. I mean, there's just no way around it. He's not been consistently good for them this season. It doesn't look like he knows where he fits. And We've had discussions about maybe even, maybe he should be the guy who moves to the bench. Jimmy is out again, which was one of the concerns coming into the season. How many games was he going to miss? And Tyler, on the other hand, has come out looking like an all-star. But Greg, I don't want to frame this as a negative because you want guys to play as well as they can. But it seems to me like it will put the Heat in a bit of a weird spot because everyone's like, okay, if he increases his value, his trade value, that's good for the franchise long term. But now he doesn't look like a player you want to trade, but he's a player you want to build around. And is he a player who fits with what they currently have? And I just think it makes for a lot of complicated decisions here.
It does in a number of ways because it's hard to evaluate things without Jimmy, one. Two, you're only 12% into the NBA season. So, we have to also take into account it's early. We've seen 30 and 11 and 11 and 30 and all kinds of stuff happen. And sample sizes are important to consider. But this is the other part of it is that I just think that there's a ceiling to the idea of Tyler being a player that you're building around. And maybe I'll be wrong about that. And I don't say that in a negative way. I just think that there needs to be more ammunition, maybe even greater than Tyler on the roster if you're really going to go up against some of these teams in the East, particularly at the very top and then the Western Conference. It's almost like they needed the Jimmy of 2 years ago, Bam of last year, and they need Tyler of this year. And they haven't gotten all three of those guys on that level at the same time. And that's what it's going to take to get these guys to rise in the Eastern Conference. And so that's the weird predicament because you're not getting it from those other guys. You're seeing it from Tyler now. And you start to wonder, is timing just not going to work out with this group?
It's funny you mention that as we go to Naveen here, because I've seen this happen a couple of times in South Florida sports, and we've discussed it. The late 90s Heat, by the time that Zoe kind of figured it out completely, and before he got sick, which obviously derailed that completely, but before that happened, Tim's knees started to break down. So you had a team where Tim was ready. Okay. I mean, once he kind of came from Golden State and he was given a big role again, he was ready at that point. He was a clutch playoff player, all those other kinds of things. But Zoe really wasn't. And then Zoe was, and Tim was broken down. And I saw it with the Dolphins. By the time that they got Marino, Zach, and Jason, and Pat and Sam, Danny couldn't do it anymore. So by the time they finally got the defense that Dan needed all those years, his body was betraying him because of age. In this situation, I don't know it's necessarily because of age, Naveen, but it does seem like we've been talking about they need a 3-level scorer, right? They need someone who's consistently efficient, who makes the kind of plays that Tyler made down the stretch, who can take over games like that. But they didn't have it in the playoffs the last couple of years. Obviously, Jimmy wasn't available this past year, but they didn't have it for long stretches of the season. But Tyler wasn't at this level. And now I don't know what Jimmy they have at this stage. He wasn't playing at an all-star level before he got hurt. And Bam looks confused. So what do you make of all of it?
It's crazy to think that the last few years we've discussed so much about how, okay, what can Tyler get you to help Jimmy and Bam get you over the hump, right? And maybe finally get that championship. But now, it's as weird as it is to say, I'm starting to wonder if you had to trade one of Tyler or Jimmy, who are you going to trade first at this point? Because with the way Tyler is playing right now, when you take out past performances, from the picture, Tyler kind of looks better, right? Tyler look, let's read these averages out right now. 24.9 points a game to 25 points a game, leading the team. 51% from the field, 48% from downtown, 83% from the free throw line. And advanced stats, he has a true shooting percentage of 66.8%, which is third in the team, only behind Alec Burks and Haywood Highsmith. However, Tyler's usage is way higher than those guys. His usage is 26.6. He's leading the team. So far, they're 4-6. So it's not like they're beating everyone up and looking like title contenders. But so far, 10 games into the season, Tyler has looked like their cornerstone, their franchise cornerstone. Now, we have seen durability issues from Tyler over the years, right? We've seen him miss a lot of games, one roll of an ankle here, and suddenly he's out close to a month. And then some other injury will pop up. This has been common in his career. So, as exciting as it is to see him kind of take his game to the next level and look like someone you can build around, we first have to see him do it for a whole regular season. Because at the end of the day, we keep talking with the Heat. What's their one issue? Availability. It's always the injuries, the missed games that have kind of held them back. So if Tyler can stay healthy and continue playing at this level, then you're looking at the potential franchise cornerstone. And then the thought of life post Jimmy doesn't seem as scary as it did a few weeks ago, because you have Tyler to build around, you have Bam to build around, you have other young guys, Jovic, maybe Hawkes to build around too. But yeah, so far, Tyler's performance has been the best part of what's been a challenging Heat season. And there have been areas to be encouraged about. However, there is some level of pause I will have to insert here because, like I mentioned, we haven't seen Tyler healthy for a full season for a while now.
Well, Greg, I want to kill a narrative here that I helped create. Okay, because Naveen kind of hit on it, but you didn't say it directly. But look, a couple of years ago, I noticed that every time Tyler scored big, they lost. It was just sort of eye test stuff, and then the record matched up with it. And I know he doesn't like the characterization. And
That phase is over.
Right, exactly. Like causation is not, or correlation is not causation. Right, I always screw that up. And you know, at that time, I think there might have been some causation, correlation is causation with that. But you can't argue that when a guy has a true shooting percentage like he has now, when he's putting up better numbers than Steph Curry. You can't argue that he's the ball being in his hands more, and it's not even in his hands more. Actually, Naveen, you mentioned his usage. It's actually slightly down from last season, slightly. Okay. And that's even with Jimmy missing a couple games here. It's about the same, but it's not higher. And a lot of his stuff has been off the ball. But what I'm saying is the reliance on him offensively, which is greater than it's ever been, is not the reason they're losing. They would be losing by more if not for him. Because honestly, I don't see anybody else out there on the floor right now who's going to do anything offensively to keep them in these games. There just isn't anyone. Rozier's not doing it, and Bam doesn't seem to want to do it. That's been one of my biggest disappointments. And Jimmy's averaging, even before he went out, is averaging fewer than 2 points per game in the first quarter. He's literally just out there for the first quarter, for that first stint. He only seems to get it going when he comes back in with the subs, and then he had a big second half against Sacramento. So without Tyler, like there's no offense to this team right now. And the only other guy who seems to be contributing to it is when now that Duncan's got himself right, and the two of them are playing together, and I think they should be starting together at this stage. But Greg, that's the thing. Like we can't make the case as we start to say, okay, what can you win with Tyler doing this, and who needs to be around him? I do think we just need to drop the thing that this is not good for them. I don't agree with that right now. The question is, how good can it be with the right pieces around him? And are the current right pieces on this roster?
This is the big question. If Jimmy Butler is the Jimmy Butler we saw in some playoff runs and in key moments throughout regular seasons, and he's available, I think that you can make a case that that's their path to competing in the Eastern Conference with Tyler at this level. And I would imagine Bam's going to eventually find himself throughout this season. I know that early it's been ugly. He has admitted that. He's been very open about talking about the offensive struggles and such. I think they'll figure that out. But the question marks really for Tyler, unfortunately, it's not really under his control. He needs to keep playing as well as he is. And then they need Jimmy Butler to take that leap that Jimmy Butler typically makes. And I don't know that that's the big question mark. Does he have that in him to go back into playoff series and be the best player when you're up against Giannis or something like that? Like those are those type of moments that you're going to need from a player. And I don't know that building around Tyler as that player maybe is the role. I feel like you need somebody just a bit above Tyler Herro in terms of the pecking order, and that should be the fully healthy alpha, as you like to say, Ethan, Jimmy Butler. But are we going to get that version? That's the question.
Well, I mean, look at the Cavs right now. Okay, they're 13-0 as we're speaking, with virtually the same team they had last year. Like, I mean, they haven't had Strus healthy. That's really been the only difference. They re-signed Okoro, and they still got Mobley and Allen. They've got Mitchell and Garland. We all agree that Donovan Mitchell is still their best player.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I mean, the numbers are not crazy. I mean, there's other guys who've had big seasons for them, and they really Atkinson, who I thought should have gotten a head coaching job again way before this. He got pushed out in the Nets job when he shouldn't have. But I guess here's the question: a team being led by Donovan Mitchell is now 13-0. Okay, how much of a higher level is Mitchell playing at, or can Mitchell get to, than what we're seeing from Tyler? Can Tyler? This would have sounded crazy 3 weeks ago, especially as we talked. Everybody was like, he hasn't improved. I always said he improved. He improved from the bubble season, all that, but the improvements have been incremental, and then there's been the setbacks that you've mentioned with the injuries. But now he's getting more attention. I thought the game 2 games ago, not the 40-point game, which was ridiculous. He shot the ball crazy. Okay. But the game before that when he was being shaded on every possession, doubled, and still making the right play, like he is making these reads. The game is slow for him right now. Okay. So maybe it's not so crazy now when you look at his numbers. Like how much can Tyler Herro be a Donovan Mitchell-like player for this team?
Well, I don't think he's ever going to be Donovan Mitchell because Donovan Mitchell has this athleticism to him that I don't think Tyler's ever going to reach. So when you consider transition opportunities, even pushing the pace and just making plays out of nowhere, I think Mitchell will always be a level above Herro because of the athleticism. I mean, that's what Dwayne did for so many years with the Heat, right? There were possessions leading to nowhere, and Dwayne would make something out of nothing because of his combination of athletic prowess and at IQ and skill. But Ethan, this to me should actually be encouraging for the Heat, but they're not putting the necessary steps to taking advantage of what we're seeing from Tyler. I mean, think about it. Tyler's averaging essentially 25-5-5 on ultra efficient shooting from the field, right? If you think about it, theoretically, that means all you need from Jimmy now is to be who Jimmy was last regular season. All you need from Bam is for Bam to be who he has been the last few regular seasons, because Tyler, he's showing that he's taking the leap. So naturally, if you have the other two guys playing at the same level they were last season, with Tyler taking it a level up, that should make the team better. We talked about the Cavs getting off to a good start. One of the reasons I initially thought the Heat should be able to get to a good start was because their first 3 or out of 5 or 4 out of 6 games were cupcakes, actually, right? They had some easy teams in the schedule before this road trip. And I thought that continuity from last season being together should at least get them over the hump early on. It hasn't worked. Now, why hasn't it worked? And you can find the difference between them and the Cavaliers here. The Cavaliers, as a team on defense, they're getting the job done. When you look at defensive rating and particularly defensive rebounding percentage, the Cavs are better. The Heat, not so much. The Heat are middle of the pack in defensive rating right now, 112.8. Defensive rebounding percentage, the Heat not so good, 20th in the NBA, 69.4%. So those two areas have really hurt them. And I go to Terry Rozier here, right? Because if Terry Rozier is not giving you the offensive production to balance out what you're losing by playing him on defense, and we've seen so many teams target him because of his size, because of his lack of lateral quickness sometimes, it's not going to work out. And then you compound that with some of the other, for the lack of a better term, dumb stuff that the Heat are doing, like going cold in the third quarter, Spoelstra calling a timeout when they didn't have a timeout. I've tweeted this a few times, and I think this rings true for me. Literally 2 years ago, when you think about the 2023 run to the finals, or even the year before when they were the 1 seed, made the conference finals. You can even go back to the bubble in 2020. The Miami Heat used to be a team that found ways to win games they were supposed to lose. That's who they were. That's what Heat culture was about. They've become a team that has found ways to lose games they're supposed to win. And that is the biggest issue right now. Something is problematic there. And they keep saying, oh, we're going to fix it. We're going to figure it out. It's going to be okay. But then the pattern keeps repeating. They shoot themselves in the foot constantly. And it's really disappointing because when you look at the numbers, Tyler has elevated himself a level. Jimmy's out with an ankle sprain. We're probably going to see that 3 more times this season. But ideally, when he's on the court and Bam is on the court, and you consider the fact they're technically deeper with a backup center in Khalil Ware, with Pelle Larsson playing actually decent spot minutes, with Jaquez looking like someone who can give you good production in that 6-man spot, they're supposed to be better, but they're not. And that's because they're losing ways in methods that go beyond the stat sheet. It's dumb decisions. It's losing the interest to play defense when their shots aren't going in. It's the third quarter issues. It's also calling a timeout when they don't have any. They're finding ways to lose games they're supposed to win. And this is something that seems like it won't be solved just by saying, okay, Tyler, now you're averaging 5 more points a game.
That's a good point. I mean, you look at the Sacramento game; they absolutely found a way to lose that one. I mean, they needed a defensive rebound. Like this is the kind of stuff that we've talked about, and they still, they've beaten one good team. They beat Minnesota. The other 3 were the cupcake games that Naveen was referencing. On the other side, I want to get more into, and I feel like it's several podcasts, like how this affects the long-term decisions. But I as far as what you do with Tyler now, because I mean the idea like of trading him at his value being highest, I'm going to disagree with a lot of Heat fans on that. And I'll tell you the other part of this, okay? That I think our core audience doesn't understand. And I get it, because these are the most in tune people, the people who subscribe to Off the Floor, that are on the app formerly known as Twitter, that are moving to Blue Sky, that follow us in all these different places, okay? They are totally engaged in this stuff, and they get on every player for every single thing that they do. And obviously we've talked about the polarization of Herro over that period of time, right? But when you go in the arena and you see the Herro jerseys, and you see the way, and even on the road, all this stuff, Tyler is very popular with, very, very popular with sort of the casual to more than casual, slightly more than casual Heat fan base. Okay. Very much so. And now he's playing his ass off. Okay. It's bad business to trade that guy right now. I think beyond. Yes, go ahead.
Would you trade Tyler straight up for Dame Lillard right now?
With the contract? No.
Exactly.
No.
And it's not just the contract, it's the play as well. You'd rather have maybe 8 years of Tyler,
it's the play, Naveen, but the contract plays into it, because the reason, look, when we talked about trading for Dame as the perfect fit with Bam and Jimmy, we were talking about a different Jimmy. That's part of it, but the other thing is that the 3 reasons, and Greg, we talked about this, the 3 reasons that they were hesitant to go all in on Dame were age, contract, defense. Okay. And all 3 things have kind of proven out right now. It doesn't mean Dame's not a Hall of Famer, but maybe he would play differently in a place he wants to be. Okay, that's part of it. But the defense is not going to get better. So if you're talking about one of the knocks against Tyler being defense, Dame's defense is not better than Tyler's. Tyler's contract, $29 million a year. Okay, Dame's going to be making north of 50. And then you talk about the age, where obviously Tyler's a still improving player, clearly, at his age. So I know fans are going to go all over me about this. Well, you don't trade for – but no, so you have to factor all those things into it. But when we were talking about them trading Tyler and Filler and 2 first-round picks maybe for Dame, you don't do that now. You don't do that now. Like, no way at all.
There's a couple reasons for it.
Go ahead.
Like, this is the other thing. The whole premise behind the Dame Lillard experiment and the way that was going to work in Miami is that you're going to cover up his deficiencies on defense. This team is not equipped to do that because they have not proven to be a good defensive team independent of Dame. So I just think now you have other issues, and I don't think necessarily that punting Tyler for what do you think? Do we have like Dame Lillard at this robust offensive level, maybe for 2 more years? And then Jimmy is also in this weird spot where you don't really know how the future is going to pan out there. To me, I think that this isn't a moment. You hear people talk about well, this is when the Heat should be proactive and trade Tyler when his value is highest. I don't think any decision maker in the league, one, is basing their decision solely off of 10 games, but two, that's just not how the NBA works. It's not a video game. And so that's the unfortunate part, is that I don't know that the Heat are going to see the best version of all these guys together at once. And that's going to be a sad part of this. But going forward, when you talk about the future, to have Tyler and then to have Bam as building blocks, that's not a bad thing if Tyler is continuing to ascend. So there's positives in this, but the Jimmy angle is what leaves everything kind of in limbo.
Well, the problem is when you say you may not see the best version of all of them at once, the reality is, even if they had the best versions, I'm not sure they fit, because we've never seen it fit. I mean, even the finals run came without Tyler. Tyler's play right now largely without Jimmy doing a lot. Like it never feels like they're all in sync together. This is not. That's where I differ with the front office a little bit, because this whole idea of seeing them all healthy, and I'm like, well, when we see them healthy, they don't look like they know each other.
Even the Eastern Conference Finals run, Ethan, where they lost in 7 to the Boston, Tyler was not fully integrated in everything they did in that run either.
He was hurt that time too. We've never seen it. Now they're trying to force feed this backcourt, which we said would be problematic before the year. And I want to get into how you handle this. We're gonna get to that after the break, and how you sort of get the most out of it right now. But the thing with Tyler is, and we will do more episodes on this, but the question is, what are you trading for, right? Okay, so you mentioned, Naveen, okay, trading for a guy like Dame, who's clearly on the other side of his prime, who doesn't solve your defensive issues, who really was there to be a complement for Jimmy in their sort of both of their back ends of their prime, with Bam popping up, and now it doesn't look like that makes any sense. Okay, so you're not gonna turn and trade Tyler for 2 first-round picks or something. By the way, they could probably get that, but they're not gonna trade Tyler for 2 first-round picks to do what with? To flip him for another scorer who's as efficient or equally. I mean, unless you're going all in on Giannis, like I don't even know what who's the player you want with that. So that's why I have issues with that. And you're not, and the other trade, which Greg, we should admit, we endorsed this offseason, we didn't see it, was kind of the reshuffling trade, right? Where you're moving Tyler for 2 better fitting pieces, right? So like a real 4 and maybe a different kind of guard to play there. Maybe 2 players who aren't quite as to the skill level of Tyler, but they fit your team better. I don't think that's a move now either, because again, what are you trying to fit with? You're trying to fit with 35-year-old Jimmy Butler in the last year of his contract? Like, I don't get that. So yes, we've talked about all this stuff, but I don't think we saw him taking this kind of jump. And I don't know that they did either. And again, how that changes the calculus is going to be one of the things that's going to be really interesting to watch. All right. On the other side is, I want to get to how you sort of make the most of it now. I have a couple of suggestions here. I'm curious what Greg and Naveen think. Before we do, if you have a car accident, you want to know what this guy thinks. Eric Rubenstein. Find him at ericrubenstein.com. If you're injured, call or text. Real simple, 877-829-ERIC. That's 877-829-ERIC, not spelled the Spolster way, the other way, or 877-829-3742. You can also check him out on Instagram at Attorney Rubenstein or at ericrubenstein.com. Went to St. Thomas University, grew up in Lauderhill. He's a 305 guy now, though, through and through. Knows everything about the court system down. He'll handle it for you. Okay, he'll handle it for you. EricRubenstein.com. Also, I will say, is one of the most entertaining Instagrams. You never know who's it's gonna. Anybody from Meek Mill to Rick Ross to Haywood Highsmith is gonna show up with him. He knows everybody in this town and beyond. So check him out, EricRubenstein.com or Attorney Rubenstein on IG. All right, here's the first thing I would do, Naveen. You mentioned Rozier. Everything we talked about with Tyler now applies to Terry. I think you put him on the bench now. Doesn't mean he doesn't have a prominent role, but we talked about getting him some minutes with the bench guys anyway against Fulcher, sort of leaning into Jimmy anchoring those units. I would get Rozier out there where he can basically be free to either have a game or not. You know what I mean? Like either get into rhythm or not. But you're giving up too much defensively in the starting unit. There's too much, it seems, of a guarantee that he's going to play down the stretch with Tyler when it's not working. It's not working, and it doesn't look like it's going to work. I would start Duncan. I have said that I would start Jaquez before, but I think leaving Jaquez on the bench with Rozier makes some sense. I would get Duncan in the starting lineup. He and Herro play off each other beautifully at this stage, and it stretches the floor, and it also makes Bam more comfortable to have Duncan out there with him. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong. I would just go a different route. And at first, I was hesitant to do the whole Rozier off the bench because, as much as possible, you want your main guys playing minutes with each other, getting used to each other. But I think we have enough of a sample size now to warrant a different look to see how it might impact the team. Because so far, since they made the Rozier move and inserting him in the starting unit, it's not like it's led to wins, right? And we have seen this formula kind of work before. Remember, Jimmy's first season with the Heat, Goran, he started in the postseason, but he was coming off the bench during the regular season. And let's not forget, the Heat were the second seed at one point in that 2020 season before, right before the COVID break, they started slipping a little bit and then they lost when middle of the conference. So it has worked. I think it would work. Instead of Duncan, though, I would have Jovic and Highsmith start with Tyler, Bam, and Jimmy. And I know immediately people might say, okay, but you don't have a point guard or you're going to force Tyler to play point guard. But I feel like that's a conversation more for the mid 2000s because when you look at the way the Heat operate now, actions start with Jimmy in the post. Actions start with Bam in the handoffs, top of the key. Actions start with Tyler playing high screen and roll or coming off handoffs to sometimes even Jovic might, once in a while create something. You need a point guard more to bring the ball down in the court against pressure and get things into action, which I think Tyler can do. But in terms of running different sets in the offense, they can do that by committee. And I feel by inserting Jovic and inserting Highsmith there, you have more size, you have more length, you have more height, and that could maybe solve some of the defensive rebounding issues you've been having. And I really love the way Highsmith's been playing defense recently. It feels like the Heat's offense is always at its best when the defense is creating things for them. And Highsmith's defense has put them in good positions over the last few games. So if you're starting Herro, Highsmith, Jovic, Jimmy, Bam, off the bench, you've got Rozier, Jaquez, Duncan Robinson, Khalil Ware, maybe Kevin Love or Larson, depending on the game. I like that unit off the bench too. I feel like that's more geared towards the unit Rozier played with in Charlotte, playing with young guys, running on the breaks, getting shots up, playing with pace. So you can basically tell them, okay, Terry, here's the ball, kind of like you did with Dragic a few years ago. Here's the ball, play with guys off the bench, lead them, push the pace, have the ultimate green light. And you know what? If you're having a good shooting game, Spoelstra should tell them, we'll close with you. We'll put you in the closing lineup with everybody else. I think that could get Rozier's confidence up. Definitely would get his fantasy stats up because God knows I need that. And I think it would help the Heat a ton. And again, I think if you're playing the starting five, I'm going to mention again, Tyler, Jimmy, Bam, Jovic, Highsmith, who's the smallest guy in the lineup? I think that's Tyler. And Tyler's about 6'5", 6'6", maybe. Suddenly,
6'5".
Exactly. Suddenly you have length, you have size, you can take care of some of the rebounding issues. And I think the shooting of that lineup would be pretty good. Rozier technically supposed to be a good spacer for Bam and Jimmy, but Rozier gets his shots by doing the dribble, pull up. You do all the moves, something like that. And I think with these three guys playing with Bam and Jimmy instead, that could even give them more spacing to operate.
Well, Greg, it's interesting in this sense because I said that I think that ideally the perfect partner for Tyler is, a long defender in the backcourt, which, I mean, that's Hayward. The question is Hayward ready to take on the offensive responsibility? So that would come with being in that lineup. In other words, he's going to get some open threes. Is he going to make them? He's going to have a little bit of a dribble drive game, which we've seen some of it. I'm torn on it because I say, okay, if you weren't going to, even with Duncan starting, I was thinking maybe you start Hayward over Jovic. The problem with, and that way you cover up things defensively with Hayward. So I'm not against Hayward starting. The issue then, though, if Jovic doesn't start, is I don't know if he plays because then then your bench, you've got Ware, Jovic, and Love sort of as bigs off the bench. It's a little. it's a little unbalanced, and that's why I was like, okay, you leave Jovic in the starting lineup, maybe in all that. But are you in agreement right now? Let's start here. Is it time to give up on the Rozier Herro starting backcourt at this stage?
I think so. I think that they're at a point where you clearly can see that Terry is he's thinking too much. He's not playing like he normally would play in terms of his just overall confidence. He's being a little like timid in certain situations, and not in every situation. I mean, he made that key pass underneath the basket out to Tyler for the 3 late in that game. So he's making plays here and there, but not at the level that you would expect. So I think him going to the bench is probably the move. And I had not thought about the lineup that Naveen proposed with Jovic and Highsmith. That was not something that had crossed my mind yet. That's an interesting take on it, because the league is kind of moving to, and Spo has talked about, at one point, could you have 5, 6'9", 6'10" guys out there? And that's how you're kind of moving in that direction, besides Tyler, when you're proposing that kind of lineup. I just think that they need Duncan on the court because, and you alluded to this earlier, Ethan, it could help Bam get more comfortable. And the thing that they need is they don't just need Tyler to continue to play this well. They don't need to just figure out the rotation, and Jimmy needs to come back healthy and playing well. They need Bam to find himself. And so I think Duncan helps with that. And that's why I'm kind of a proponent of them going with Duncan and Haywood. I think we can all agree that the defensive stuff that Haywood Highsmith has brought, I think he's also, when guys are playing for contracts, boy, they figure out themselves offensively. And so this might be that year for him. So I think he's a guy we can agree on. It's just, how do they integrate the other players? Because to your point, Nico could end up getting squeezed, and that's not the best for a young player either.
Just to add to that,
Right,
Greg, you know what I like about that lineup is Jovic and Highsmith do a lot of their damage, even if they start off in the corners. So if you have Jovic in one corner, Highsmith in one corner, suddenly you have all that space for Bam and Tyler to play the screen and roll game. And then Jimmy could cut, Jimmy could play more off ball. You could have pistol action with Jimmy in the wing. I think the spacing would work even better, because Rozier in the corner just looks awkward. He doesn't look comfortable playing in the in the corner. He looks awkward. He likes having the ball top of the key and doing what Tyler does a lot. He likes doing his offensive damage the same way Tyler does.
Well, and that's one of the reasons going back why Spoelstra would separate LeBron and Dwayne for minutes, because they operated in the same spaces. I'm not saying that Terry and Tyler are LeBron and Dwayne, but he has history doing this and figuring out how to get them minutes. I'll close with this, okay? And there's much more that we can do on this topic, and we appreciate Naveen joining us. And obviously, as we head into trade deadline season, we're going to talk a lot about what the future looks like. But I'll just say this: if the Heat really want to see, if they're not convinced yet, okay, if they still think there's a chance of the Jimmy, Bam, Tyler thing, which is the core 3, let's get Terry out of there for the minute, okay? That's the core 3 here. If they still want to see if that works, then I think it's incumbent on them over this next stretch of games, whenever Jimmy comes back, to figure out which 2 pieces work best with them on the current roster. And so if it's what Naveen is saying, and we think, okay, maybe it's Highsmith and Jovic, or maybe it's me saying it's Duncan and Highsmith, or maybe, Greg, you go a slightly different direction there. Whatever direction they have to find those, maybe it's Jaquez, okay? And it would be great if it's Jaquez, because Jaquez figures to be someone who would be here for a while. Or maybe even he's someone who ultimately replaces Jimmy in that role in some capacity. But I think that, look, I don't think that the Bam, Tyler, Jimmy connection is ever going to lead to a championship. I think we've seen it max out. They'll talk about the success that they've had with those 3 guys as their core guys over recent years, and they're right about that. But of course, Tyler missed a good portion of that. Bam and Jimmy were at different stages at different times and all the rest of it. I don't see it. But if they want to see what it looks like, they need to figure out which 2 guys on this roster. And I think that the Rozier thing, it's a talent thing. It's like, okay, Terry has maybe more upside talent than some of these guys. Greg, you and I both liked the trade at the time. So again, it's another one where I can't say they screwed it up, because at least not. No, they went against what we were saying.
I was just so sick of Kyle's bullshit, I'll be honest.
So was I. And so I think so were they. And here was a first-round pick. And so give up the expiring and the first-round pick and get Terry, and maybe it'll juice the offense and all that. I get the reasoning for it. But it looks like Terry it doesn't look like Terry can operate as a starting point guard on a team that has aspirations. I don't like a team like Charlotte. Yeah, and here's the other thing: he wasn't even really the starting point guard in Charlotte. They had LaMelo, so they were kind of playing off each other in terms of who was handling. I think Terry Rozier, even more so than what we talked about with Tyler, because clearly Tyler's more than that now. Terry Rozier, in the best case scenario, is a 6th or 7th man. I think that's what this has shown, and I know that fans are gonna be upset about trading a first-round pick for that, but. At least maximize what you have here in the remaining time in his contract, and maybe you recoup some of his asset value when he's going to be what appears to be a $22.3 million expiring next season, because I don't think he's going to earn that extra $1.7 million, because that requires not just playing 70 games, but also getting the second round of the playoffs. The Heat will gladly pay that to get that far, but I don't think that's a likelihood right now. So all I'm saying is Tyler, keeper, not keeper, if they want to lean into the Jimmy Bam Tyler thing, they need to keep experimenting with the other two guys and see who emerges. And I think it's pretty clear right now that the Rozier Jovic combo ain't it. I think they need to come up with something else.
Agree.
Greg, I'll let you close. Okay.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. I don't think that you put a punctuation on that. We're good.
Naveen, we thank you. What time is it there? 9:30 in the morning?
10:30 in the morning.
Okay, bright and early there. All right. Well, we'll have you on more often. We appreciate the insight that you provide here on the show for sure. Again, check out Mercy's event. I'll post about it into the night on Friday night. And what happened here? Yeah, it's even worse. All right. Have a good night.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.